We're joined now by Jean-André Prager, Senior Fellow at the Policy Exchange think tank, former advisor to 3 Conservative Prime Ministers on welfare to look at this. Thanks for coming in, Jean-André. First of all, the issue of PIP payments, personal independence payments, which in the end the government has kicked into the long grass with this Timms review. The rise in them over the past few years, which has clearly contributed to this welfare bill going up so much. What do you put it down to?
Well, I think it's. I think this is a problem that's is perplexing everybody, to be honest, because the issue is it's not just the prevalence of disability, which is what people have talked about over recent years, has grown considerably. But actually, the rate of people claiming PIP is double the increase in prevalence. So I think that there's a major issue around a full understanding of that. And I think it goes to a kind of broader philosophical problem that we have, where our understanding of disability has changed, I think, over the last 10 to 15 years, has got more nuanced and more well understood, especially around mental health conditions. But our disability benefit system has not changed at all. And it hasn't changed since 2013 when PIP was introduced. And it's the gap between our understanding of disability and our benefit system, which I think is contributing to this problem.
Right. So what needs to change then? What would you recommend?
Well, I think we have to re-baseline what we think a disability is. And actually also, and that's a very complicated and difficult thing, I mean, the gateway for PIP has increased dramatically since it was originally introduced. And that's because of different legal challenges in the way that the way we have perceived what the benefit was intended to do. And I think...
And when you say re-baseline, what exactly are you
Well, I think
about?
what I would say is that sometimes, and this is a very, very difficult conversation to have and it needs to be a very open one, but sometimes you can have a disability and might not incur an extra cost, and PIP is an extra cost benefit. And so I think we need to go back to the base principles of the purpose of PIP, which is an extra cost benefit, and what it's intended to achieve for the claimant. And we haven't had that kind of broad philosophical discussion because we always get caught in a kind of debate around cuts.
And points, which is how
Indeed.
PIP works, of course.
Indeed.
I mean, that's what the Timms review is going to be looking
Indeed.
at, isn't it? How you qualify. I mean, the revised
Yes.
assessment was putting a lot of store on one of the areas, one of the particular areas that people were being assessed in, having a high rating or
Yes.
the disability.
4 points, yeah.
4 points, yeah. Is that something you think was the right approach, or
No, I think, and I've said this in my report for Policy Exchange, that we actually need to constantly reevaluate our criteria for PIP. And I mean, part of the problem is, and the government has rightly pointed this out in some of their statements over recent days, that we haven't looked at this since 2013. And whenever we look at criteria, it gets into a very, very fraught debate because it is about people's entitlement and the money they receive. But I think it would be far more helpful if we constantly looked at criteria and constantly reevaluated whether the right support was in place. But we never do this because it becomes such a fraught debate whenever we do.
does that mean completely rethinking the system then?
Well, I think, I think, for example, it means having a kind of constant review where you have medical professionals, disability people's organisations, which are going to be involved in the Timms review, constantly looking at whether the criteria is correct. And we haven't had a baseline look at the criteria since 2013.
Is there anything that's in the bill as it is now that is going to help the situation, do you think?
Well, as people have already discussed, PIP is not in the bill anymore. There are no clauses to do with PIP. But I do think the government has rightly looked at the discrepancy between the health element of universal credit and the standard allowance. And I do think that the huge discrepancy in the amount you receive if you're on the health element and the amount you receive if you're on standard allowance does probably create bad incentives and means people try to prove what they cannot do rather than maybe what they could do. And I do think that's a major problem. I think all politicians have recognised that over recent years.
Jean-André Prager, Senior Fellow at the Policy Exchange think tank.